Welcome to The Whole Pineapple. I'm Ruby Boris.
And I'm Ann Judge. The Whole Pineapple is a podcast about wellness focused around fertility. And on these weekly mini episodes, we bring you bite-sized ideas for you to snack on.
Like breathing exercises, book reviews. Maybe we'll review some scientific research, or we'll share some wellness and fertility stories from our listeners.
So if you're looking for a tip or a trick related to your fertility and well-being, then you've come to the right place.
Let's dig in.
Welcome back to the Whole Pineapple Snack Edition for another one of our monthly Mindful Moments with Jamie. Hello, Jamie Mimanga. Welcome back to the program.
Hi, Anne. Thanks for having me.
We wanted to talk a little bit about something that actually came up obliquely just because there was an article in the New York Times. It was just like their random work advice column, but someone sent it to me because it vaguely referenced fertility. And I just want to go ahead and read it because I had some thoughts and then you had some thoughts. And then we thought, oh, let's talk about this. So someone wrote in to ask, I work in a small office and share a desk with a man whose wife just had a baby. He has the desk 2 days a week and I have the desk another 2. When I come to work, I'm confronted with an array of giant pictures of a baby acne modeled monstrosity sitting on my desk. I remove the pictures so I don't have to look at them. I don't place the pictures back on the desk at the end of the day because I don't think that's my responsibility. At the Christmas party this year, the father of the infant jokingly said, "So it seems you aren't a fan of my baby." And I replied, "Well, I just feel weird staring at a random baby when I'm trying to work." He then launched into an unprompted description of his family's IVF journey. He seemed intent on shaming me and putting baby in a drawer. Never mind, it's not my baby, and frankly, overpopulation stresses me out. And a part of me can't let things lie. I confess that the real reason I can't stand to look at his baby was I recently learned I'm infertile. And by the time I finished telling my lie, a bit of an audience had formed, so I essentially told my entire office a sob story that isn't true, like a sociopath would. And now everyone is being way too nice to me, and an older coworker who genuinely does have fertility issues has been trying to bond over our supposed shared struggle. I'm embarrassed, ashamed, and horrified every time I'm at work, and I feel like I need to switch jobs at this point. What should I do? Anonymous. So that took a turn in the middle that I didn't expect. Probably for you as well.
I think we were originally talking about this over email, and I read it. And even in my email, I had a lot of dots because I was so speechless reading this, and I didn't even know how to respond.
The overarching theme of today's snack, I do want to talk a little bit about dealing with triggers at work. And this is an example that's kind of like out there because it's not a real example. It's someone using infertility as an excuse to get out of a situation that they just don't like to look at pictures of. But there are people probably in this situation that's very true, where it's really hurtful to have to come in and stare at someone else's baby photos all day. And I totally get that. And so, although in this particular scenario, I would agree with her when she says like a sociopath would. I think there are lots of easier ways to get out of that situation. But there are a lot of people in situations where your work just is triggering. That's just what it is. And, you know, we thought we'd talk a little bit about how you get through the day because you kind of need a job in most situations.
Yeah, and to your point, I can really empathize with the first part of that as well, of like that could be very triggering. I mean, I was pretty stunned by some of like the language and that she used, and I mean there was just a lot there.
Yeah, even in my darkest days, I don't think I'd call it acne-ridden monstrosity for someone's baby photo. But
no. But I can see how that could be very triggering, especially in a shared workspace. That could be very difficult to go to work every day, be faced with that. And again, I think there's a lot of different ways to handle that. It did bring up some of my own past work experiences, where I did have some feelings of trigger. I was a counselor before my own fertility journey. I worked with kids and families. I worked in a community health center. I worked with an underserved population. And so pregnancies were everywhere. And as I was telling you earlier, Anne, some were in healthier situations than others, and it presented me with a lot of challenges. I know that there were days that I went to work and I really struggled sitting, with my inner dialogue and trying to still show up for the people that I was, trying to serve and for my job. And it was definitely emotional.
What I know for me, when I was initially doing treatment, I was working as a labor and delivery nurse. And so not only was it hard emotionally, but I felt like really kind of personally judged in terms of the quality of my work, because most women, when they're coming in, if they're in labor, they'd be like, oh, do you have kids? What was this like for you? And so it's not like I'm going to go into my whole story, but if I was kind of like, oh, I don't have kids yet, they'd kind of be like, oh, well then, you don't know. And, that's a really tough situation to be in. And I never found a good way to answer that question because you're in a professional situation. You don't want to have a big conversation. It's not appropriate for the moment, but it's still something that comes up every single day. And there aren't that many jobs, but there are more than you would think. People that work as their pediatricians or kindergarten teachers. I mean, there's all kinds of professions that people are in that you are dealing on a daily basis, often with things that can be really hard when people are in a relationship with children and families that is what you are trying to get towards.
And I know that, like, for me personally, I don't think I always had good answers either. And I certainly was judged for my work as well. And in hindsight, as a counselor, talking to people about raising their children, some of it was warranted for sure. But I felt some of that judgment too. And so that was hard because I was really well educated and practiced and had done, a tremendous amount of training, but it was just hard.
Yeah.
I know that for me personally, and again, in that professional situation, it was absolutely not okay for me to, I changed the subject a lot, moved it back to whatever they had on their plate and they were coming in for. But at the end of the day, I needed a way to take care of me. So I know for me in that situation, I had a process where I would come home and my husband kind of knew he just didn't really engage with me in the first few minutes that I was home, especially with one job that I had. I would come home. I had this hall closet that I put all of my things in. And I had this routine where it was very symbolic, like walking into my home was me walking into my space and my life, like out of other people's lives as a counselor and into mine. And then in the closet, I would put my work things away, my briefcase, my coat, everything. And I would, and shutting the door was me firmly shutting the door on my day and putting everything away. And then I would go into the bathroom and I would either wash my hands and then sometimes maybe my face. And sometimes it would be a full shower. So I just had to like wash off the day. And when I came out of the bathroom, I could reemerge in my life, right? Like, okay, I've put it all away. I've washed it off. I've shut the door on it. And now I get to live for me and not think about any of these other things that came up today.
I love that physical actions to wash it up, because that's one of the things that often I'll try and do when I'm really like ruminating on something is I'll like try and do that mental imagery of like taking those thoughts and emotions and shoving them in the box and locking them up with this key and then like buried it and like push it over the boat in the ocean and really kind of imagining this whole thing. But you're right to like tangibly do it, to be like, I am putting my work stuff away and I am closing that door and I'm washing off the dirt of the day in all of those like senses. I think that's a really, really good thing to do. And I like also, in our casual triggers episode, we talked about sometimes putting the question back on people when they asked, if you don't want to necessarily give an answer, but just in kind of a, confused way. Oh, why would you ask that? They don't see what they say, but often maybe that'll make them feel a little bit like, oh, maybe I don't need to have that question. And then you can kind of move onward, because in the casual triggers, we talked about how you can do white lies to get out of situations, but you don't want to lie in a situation when you're going to have an ongoing relationship with a client at work. And, that's going to end up being like our example for the person. And when you lie about something, all of a sudden your situation gets more complicated if these are people that you're going to be interacting with more frequently.
Right. No, absolutely. What I did for my professional, now that I'm thinking about it, and again, this is counseling, but it was therapeutic to talk about that too. Of course, I had to check in with myself and be aware of my, what we call transference and countertransference, and that's all very important in counseling. But I would check in, with myself first, and then maybe come back to like, it seems really important to you in this situation that whether or not I have had kids, tell me a little bit more about that. And then oftentimes it wasn't about me at all. It was really more about like their worries of, they were struggling so much. Maybe they were worried that they wouldn't be able to find the help that they needed, or feeling like they wouldn't be understood or validated, that they would be judged in some way. And so it usually came down to something that they were holding on to internally and really didn't have much to do with me at all. So that was another way that I would cope with that in a work situation, is like, this sounds important to you, tell me more.
That's good, because I mean, just in general life, I think it's good to remember that most of the time, things that we think are about us are not about us. They're about the other person, and they kind of are in their own head and having their own thoughts. And sometimes people are just they're trying to make polite conversation, and they don't realize that this can be a really painful conversation to have. That to ask someone if they have kids is not the easy conversation coworker thing that you think you might be.
Yeah. And you definitely might not be in that counselor setting where you have that training to like say something, and be able to follow up with that. Obviously that takes some practice. So I think other things you could do in that moment is, again, like we talked about, shifting the conversation to like, whatever it is that that they're coming in with, because you're there working with them, for them, potentially, right, in whatever situation that is. If you're...
That's true. I've done that. I'd be like, well, let's focus on you. We're here for you. Mm-hmm. Like, just kind of smoothly go over there. Like, we're not here to talk about me. Like, how are you? Just kind of refocusing back to what your time is supposed to actually be on.
And especially for people that are just trying to make polite conversation, they don't know that they've just stepped on a trigger. They're typically not aware of that. And they're going to be like, they won't notice the sidestep.
Yeah, I feel like were I this letter writer, I would have just like put the photos down or flipped them away when I got to work and flipped them back when I leave. Like you do what you need to be in the moment. You don't have to make a big show of it that's going to turn into a bigger situation, because, again, it's all a lie. So it doesn't, but even if it was true, like to put them away in a drawer and deliberately not put them back, that's kind of like almost drawing more attention to the fact that for some reason, this is triggering, and maybe you don't want to talk about why it's triggering. Maybe you just want to kind of keep your work and your personal life separate.
And it's totally okay to do that, to like move somebody's photos to the side if you're sharing that space, because again, it is a shared space. But if you're dreading going to work every day because of having to put these pictures away every day, right, because it's so triggering for you, then it might be worth opening the door to having a conversation. And you don't have to share everything, right? But just to say, hey, maybe... would it be possible for you to maybe put these pictures away when you're done, with our shared workspace? I totally get that you want to have them up here when you're working, but like just to kind of prepare the space when I come so that I'm not having to do that. But, for me, it's kind of hard to have these on the desk, whether it's like a space thing or, however you want to say it, like, is that something you'd be willing to do? And again, typically people are going to be fairly receptive. Or could we have a few, fewer pictures on the desk since this is a shared space? Or you can at least try to have some of those conversations.
Well, nowadays, they have the digital photo frames. Maybe someone wants to have like their digital, and that way can cycle through all the photos they want, and then they turn the screen off when they leave. And so when you come in, it's just a blank screen. So technology can solve all our problems.
Maybe you gift them an inexpensive one.
Yeah, but you're right. Like sometimes you can tell just enough of what you're going through. You'd be like, hey, this is kind of hard for me to look at photos. Is there a way that, and I think I like the idea of helping other people be part of the solution, instead of feeling like you're saying that they're doing something wrong. More just like, hey, this would be helpful to me if we could get to resolution B. Like, do you have any ideas about what would work for you? Because I think you're right. Most people are inherently wanting to be sensitive to the needs of others and often have no idea that the things they're saying or the things they're doing can be making that hard.
Yeah, and especially in that situation, like I can totally understand. And I think, that person with their own IVF story, when they had those pictures to put on their desk, that probably felt really, really meaningful for them to be able to do that.
And to come in and to see them put away probably did feel really like, oh my gosh, what is their problem with my baby?
And talk about creating another trigger, right? And I think anytime we're in a shared space with somebody, if we have an ongoing relationship, I think erring on the side of caution and respect is really important to the best of our ability. Give yourself grace and recognize your emotions in the situation and, validate those, but also try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Okay, like why might this be important for them? And then how can we find a compromise or a solution that's going to be, work for everyone, right? That's going to be respectful. But yeah, like there was just such a lack of respect and so many triggers and so much kind of like really...
I feel stressed out even imagining this office, basically. Like now I just imagine the holiday party and now you have the other person wanting to talk all about fertility. And yeah, I think that she needs to leave her job, but that's fine. And speaking of that, I do still want to put out a plug, because the thing that was really the most helpful for me, and I know that not everybody can find the situation, but was reading in one of Ali Domar's books. She had a chapter on healthcare providers and how infertility can be hard. And she mentioned some people need to change jobs. And I felt like I needed that permission because it seemed like it was giving up to move out of a field that I loved. But it doesn't mean it's forever. And if you have the ability to pivot into a different work situation to protect because like you said, if you are dreading going to work because just the innate nature of your work makes it so challenging, if there is any way that you could be doing something different, it doesn't mean that you won't go back to it later, but it's not a sign that you are giving up on who you are or whatever you've worked towards to get to that point. It's just a sign that you're taking care of yourself and what you need in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I had a colleague at that same time that was going through a fertility journey, and she ended up transitioning to working exclusively with adults in a very different, like I think like veterans, and like she just kind of switched tracks completely. And I think that she ended up finding work that she was really, really passionate about in another area. And I think sometimes, it can feel like giving up or it can feel like failure, but you never know where that's going to lead you. There's no experience that's wasted.
That's why I'm here. Like now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I started working in infertility instead. It's totally where I'm meant to be. So
it's same with me. This is why I do the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about it. And I'm so thankful that I've been able to, now create this new kind of professional niche for myself. It's so rewarding. And so you never know what's going to come from that. You might find something else that you really love and doesn't have all of those triggers attached.
Because even if it's in there in some way, like there's often some way to make your situation at least a little bit better. Think about what are the parts of the job that are the absolute hardest for you. What are the things that could be changed? What are the things that are just the complete nature of the job? And usually there's a way to make your life at least somewhat better. And as much as we talk about that lack of control in infertility, so if this is some area where you can take a little bit of that control back and change something, whether it's your work schedule or, there's a lot of things that you can hopefully make some sort of changes where you feel like you're taking a little bit more control over what your day-to-day situation is.
Actually, I know somebody that they worked in customer service, like in retail, and they kind of did a couple different things, but they ended up working kind of more evening times where they wouldn't run into, it just changed the people that were coming into that particular space, or, stocking in the back and things like that, I think was also helpful for that particular person. So, there's always little adjustments and changes that can be made. And so don't be afraid to, talk to your manager about, you might not want to share all the details of what you're going through, but, to say like, I'm having, some things happening, some medical things, I'd love an opportunity to kind of like shift my focus or what I'm doing or where my time is spent a little bit, if possible, to make some things a little bit easier. Is that possible? Can you work with me?
And often your fertility clinic can be a little bit of help in that, because although we may not be able to fill out official medical leave forms, we can write letters to support all kinds of things. Like I've definitely written letters for people in the past just saying, they've been undergoing medical procedures. They feel that a shift change or this would be helpful for their treatment, just so that people can have a little bit of support when they go and talk. And many people's work situations, they want to keep the person as an employee.
Yeah.
And so if they're able to make some accommodations, a lot of places are more willing than you might think to make some sort of adjustments. Especially, again, the hope is this is not a forever thing.
Right.
This is to help in that moment. And the way you feel right now is not going to be the way you feel going to work for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really, really well said.
And now we love our jobs. Now we're so happy.
Yeah, truly. Absolutely.
Yeah. But for people that are out there, I just want you to know, I see you, reading this article, it just like brought back the memories, like it's so hard when you often are seeing work as your place of escape from thinking about what you might be going through in fertility. And it's hard to feel like it bleeds into all the different areas, but there are things you can do to try and protect yourself.
Yeah, there absolutely are. And like I've said before in previous snacks that, there's just no part of your life that is untouched by this. So wherever you can, add a little cushion or protection for yourself, just so that you can get through this in a way that feels healthy for you and doable for you, by all means, we gotta do it.
Thanks so much, Jamie. If you're dealing with your own workplace situation, share your story. Our email again is thewholepineapple@gmail.com. And I love to hear about what are some of the triggers or challenges you have at work. Maybe we'll do an episode where we kind of read through some of them with Jamie and see if we have any suggestions, because I know that can be such a hard part of this journey. Reach out anytime and I'll go quiet and let's listen to Jamie.
So today we've been talking about these work triggers, and the thing that came to mind is just how much that reduces your ability to concentrate at work when you've experienced these triggers. It's so hard to fall back into a feeling of concentration because your brain is pulled by this trigger. So that's what we're going to focus on today. A Tibetan Buddhist author and professor said about concentration that concentration allows us to really enjoy what we're doing. Whether it's being in the country or reading a book, writing or talking or thinking, concentration allows us to think more clearly and deeply. And I think when we've had these emotional triggers at work, that becomes so challenging. Your mind is being tugged on by these triggers. So, as we go through this practice, I want to acknowledge that when you first start practicing, you may find your mind wandering quite a bit. Concentration practice helps you train the mind to focus by giving it something to do. Like mindfulness, it takes time. And so when the mind wanders, you gently bring it back. And over time, the mind will learn to focus and let go of distracting thoughts all on its own. I think of this a little bit like training a puppy, because and I use puppy purposefully because we tend to have a lot of compassion for puppies when they're running amok and making a mess in our house and chewing things up. We know they're just puppies and they don't really know better yet, but we can train our puppy. And sometimes we don't have that same level of compassion for our brains, so I want to invite that level of compassion today, that as you learn to focus your mind and concentrate, it can be challenging, and it's a little like an untrained puppy, but you can train your brain to sit. So, speaking of sitting, I invite you to find a comfortable seated posture on a chair or a cushion and straighten your spine, but allow your muscles to relax. And I'd like you to briefly check in with your body. Allow the shoulders to drop. Soften the muscles of your abdomen and begin to invite in relaxation. Notice where you can feel the breath in your body. You may feel it in the abdomen, the chest. You may notice the coolness around your nostrils. For now, pick one place where you can feel the breath most easily. Rest with the sensations of the breath in this one spot. And begin counting your breaths. Inhale and exhale with awareness. And count 1. Inhale and exhale. And count 2. Continue like this up to 8, and then count backwards back to 1. And remember that counting serves as an aid to practice, giving the mind something extra on which to focus. It is not a competition or a measurement of how well you are doing. When the mind wanders, just come back to the breath. Begin back at 1 as many times as necessary. And watch out for judgment and let go of any harsh talk. Continue like this, counting the breaths and building focus. When your mind wanders, simply notice it and gently bring it back to your breath and to counting. When the mind is concentrated, notice this as well. And when 10 minutes have passed, allow your eyes to open and continue with your day, noticing when your mind is focused or wandering. Namaste.